a recent article by Business Insider, Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian, so this is a guy that has pretty much put Reddit on the mark, basically said we've hit a peak in social, and that's bad news for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. He predicted that users will move away from the big social networks toward new, more community-focused platforms. And when you look at community-focused platforms, he's talking about companies like Telegram and Discord. If you have had a chance to use those, basically they are kind of a walled garden, even more so than a Facebook or a Twitter. But mainly it's a point-to-point communication. It'll be interesting to see how and if the restaurant industry can utilize those type of technologies and platforms to get their message out. That will be something, and it may happen because if you think about how restaurant operators worked prior to social, you basically had kind of your 20% of your guests that were your regulars and people that you recognize, you knew, maybe you had their email address in your database, maybe you were sending them email. That was really how you were communicating prior to social media. And it could be an era not too far from now where we're starting to see more and more of those types of interactions. So what people seem to be clamoring for is more and more community. And community, I think, is going to be interesting, especially in the food service space, which I think WhatsApp has kind of already shown that it can succeed. But if you look at the growth of these other two companies like Telegram and Discord, there could be some potential opportunities there. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Facebook, but the point is that we get, and I get this question more and more than any, and that is, which platform should I be advertising on? So I looked at some things that were happening over on Frontline on PBS, and this was a video interview by PBS on the Facebook dilemma with Brad Parscale. And he basically is the digital media manager for the Trump campaign. He was being interviewed discussing the use of Facebook by the Russians. And the answers I thought was very surprising. One was how much money the Russians actually spent, and whether or not it really had an influence. Now, how does this play into food service? And I want you to listen to this first clip, and I'll comment on that to kind of give you an idea.
You're describing a very powerful tool, obviously a very coordinated, well-run campaign. I mean, during 2016, we know that other actors, bad actors, were using the same tools that the Trump campaign was using. I mean, do you think that Facebook bears any responsibility for the fact that bad actors were also using these powerful tools to mess with the American electorate?
You know, it's a complicated question. I mean, I would think that Facebook would probably want to verify its who's running ads first. I think once they verified them, then I think the burden changes some. You know, it's like you can't, you know, it's even the United States government can't, and police force can't manage every single person, every human, every second, right? It's an impossible task for anything, especially something as big as Facebook. You know, could they maybe question why a Russian company with Russian IP addresses are buying ads on a platform? Sounds kind of, you know, suspicious to me also. You know, maybe it was just a little amount of money they spent that it just went under the radar. You know, $6,000 or whatever is the last 6 weeks or whatever, 8 weeks. I mean, I was spending that per half second or millisecond probably. So if you take that over 6 weeks, I mean, they were spending 0.00001 cents per second. So, I mean, I could get how maybe it fly under the radar. I think they'll do a better job now, though, of probably verifying initial ad vendors. And so this problem doesn't go away. But I would imagine it's more to do with the small amount of money they spent. If they would have came and spent $100 million and they said they were going to, or they even started to spend that kind of money, I would imagine. I think one of Facebook's biggest mistakes was they were in a conflict of marketing versus ethics. So to actually explain to everybody that $6,000 in ads really wasn't doing much also makes you sound like your platform's not that powerful to do something for cheap. So if you want to get rid of every small vendor that's using your platform in America, go on TV and say, well, that actually isn't very much. So Facebook was caught in a catch-22 to say Russia couldn't do a lot with that little amount of money, or whoever these actors were. Also says that all the small businesses across America, you can't actually do something effective for that little amount of money.
So as far as I know, Facebook has not released all of the repository of advertising that happened on their platform during 2016, whether it was by the Russians or the Trump campaign or any other actors who were...
Well, Trump campaign's not an actor. Trump campaign's the official campaign.
Understood,
for the president.
but dark money groups or anyone else...
Those are also, if you're talking about super PACs and C4s and all those things, that's part of the current political system. But the only thing that's been accusatory is what these actors did from this internet research company or whatever. It's the only one I know about and the only one I've read about. And what I've read about is during the last couple months of the campaign, there was only a fraction of money spent, well less than $100,000, somewhere down under $10,000 range. There's been different accounts of how much that is. Some saying 6,000, some saying 8,000. But the fraction of that, of probably what was spent on Facebook, was probably close to 500 to 600 million in the United States by legitimate organizations. And to try to say that that 500 or 600 million, that $6,000 somehow influenced 600 million, is the biggest piece of just malarkey I've ever heard.
Even though Facebook is actually a very effective targeting tool.
Yeah, they can't say that though, because it would say, that's like saying a restaurant goes and puts $5,000 from some restaurant in Wichita, Kansas, puts $5,000, and all of the world the next day is going to know how great that restaurant is from $5,000 in advertising. It just doesn't happen. It's not possible. I don't understand it. And if someone shows me the proof that somehow it influenced somebody, I haven't seen it. But I think the media wants you to believe it because they want to believe that somehow none of this is legit, that these guys somehow faked everybody out for $6,000. And I think it's a big joke. I mean, I can barely fly from here to Hawaii and back for $6,000. I'm not going to change the entire American electorate for it.
All right, so continuing in the my tirade here when it comes to Facebook is that you have to look at the platform from a holistic point of view. So we've seen one angle, and that is the advertising mechanism itself, the way it works, how much money you would have to spend to have any kind of influence, and so on. Then I look at the trouble with Facebook. This next article, which is from Time, reported Facebook fell in the 2019 Glassdoor Employees' Choice Awards. Glassdoor is basically an employee ranking site. From ranking in the companies in the U.S. and Canada and some parts of Europe based on worker reviews. Facebook slid from first place, to 7th place, which when you look at kind of the institution that Mark built, being Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, that almost had no kind of chinks in its armor. Now we're looking at the data breaches, we're looking at trouble within, which is what I'm pointing at here. And we're looking at the whole issue of maybe not as effective marketing. They're still, granted, they're still genning out billions and billions in profits based on small businesses like restaurants out there. So it still is yet to be determined whether Facebook will be the future of where social is. I still think that Instagram is a major investment by Facebook because of the transition and the user type and behavior that happens on Instagram. Also, in this report from BuzzFeed, in a year, basically kind of just looking at missteps and scandals, Facebook's latest fiasco has inspired a clutter of leaks. So we get back to the finger pointing issues. Also, Sandberg, who is their COO, basically has denied knowledge of the company hiring of the public relations firm Definers, which was working on the political work, which anybody that was basically talking bad about Facebook, they were coming in and essentially creating anti-campaigns against those people. So this is just behavior that is unbelievable by a company that is supposed to be helping our economy and our society. But more importantly, it's the millions of small businesses that are restaurants that are out there. Now we're seeing, as I said, a drop in user behavior, a drop in operations engagement, being the operators themselves, and then all of this kind of behavior, and then just the things that are really coming out in the news when it really pertains to the political landscape. But it's kind of revealing to the industry what's really now behind the curtain. And I think that's what we're seeing most importantly, is that Facebook is in severe turmoil. Whether this will impact them in the long term, and whether Alexis Ohanian is correct that social has peaked and these guys' days are numbered, I still don't know yet that that is the case. What I would say, kind of in a wrap up here on this topic, is that Snapchat, of course, is unique and different and away from Facebook. It's not owned by Facebook yet. But that may be an alternative. And if you have not put your restaurant or your hospitality business onto Snapchat, it's worth a try. I think it's something that if you are consistent in trying to communicate via social media, this is at least a new platform that could potentially create some opportunity for you. And at the end of the day, that's what this show is here to do, and that is to try to give you ideas and innovations that can kind of move you to the next level.